No one understood where it came from. The image was clear, the scans seemed normal. Until they zoomed into the upper right corner of the lung, it was as if something had been printed inside the bone. It wasn't a shadow or a fracture. It was a number. 3 digits carved in silence. Almost invisible, but there. In the film, firm, impossible to ignore. The first to notice it was an elderly woman sitting in the waiting room. She glanced at the image from afar, squinted her eyes, and whispered something that made the technician freeze inside. That number, it's from a psalm, and it's exactly what I asked God to show. The room, once routine, seemed to go still. Even the hum of the machines faded for a moment, and it was in that instant, in that slice of silence, that something began to move, not in the patient's body, but in the soul of the one who looked at it. Because there are signs that don't show up in scans, answers that don't fit into logic, and moments when heaven uses the improbable to manifest. What that man saw that day wasn't just a radiograph. It was a prayer answered in pixels, a message embedded in flesh, a response etched in light. But what no one expected was that this wouldn't be the only X-ray to carry that same sequence, and that every time the number appeared, a new story of healing would begin to unfold. The question that remains is, do you also need to see in order to believe, or is hearing enough? If you know someone who needs a sign from God, leave their name in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs a new hope. Because sometimes, the miracle is already printed. All it needs is someone with eyes to see. Ethan didn't know how to pray anymore. It was one of those truths that hurt even in silence. He had forgotten the last time he had truly spoken to God, not a wandering thought, not a childhood reflex, but real faith. The kind that bends the knee without explanation. The last time he tried was when he still believed his wife would beat cancer. She didn't. Since then, the X-ray room had become his only altar. But it was an altar without faith. Just light, noise, reports, and silence. Ethan was a good tech professional. Fast, respectful. But his coworkers knew he was the type of man who didn't let things affect him. He never held eye contact with patients for too long. Never asked how they were doing. He just did his job and moved on. It had been that way for almost 6 years. That Monday, he arrived earlier than usual. He hadn't slept much. He had dreamed of Rachel, his wife, again. In the dream, she was sitting in a blue armchair, looking out the window, a Bible in her lap. But she said nothing, just looked at him, with an expression between longing and hope. Ethan woke up sweating, chest tight. When he opened his eyes, he felt something strange, a kind of peace that didn't match his routine, and that bothered him. "Coffee?" asked Sarah, a longtime nurse, seeing him in the break room. "Double. I need more focus than faith today," he replied, trying to sound casual. But even he didn't believe his own tone. A few hours later, Helen arrived, 74 years old, thin gray hair tied in a simple bun, clear eyes, trembling hands, but a steady voice. She arrived alone, pushing an old walker. On her lap, a small cloth bag and, inside it, a plastic envelope with prior reports. But what caught Ethan's attention was something almost imperceptible, a folded note, carefully clipped to the outside of the folder. Handwritten, it read, "Be still." He didn't comment, just called her name and escorted her to the exam room. "On the way," she said with a gentle smile, "did you know there's more silence in a prayer than in an empty room?" Ethan didn't answer. He powered up the equipment, positioned the patient, ran the tests, business as usual. But as the digital image loaded into the system, he felt something different. The screen blinked twice before stabilizing. And there, it was in the upper part of the patient's right lung, a number precisely etched, 46 minutes and 10 seconds. He froze. He went back to check the machine's history, reviewed the exam data, tried restarting the system. But there it was again, 46 to 10, almost as if it had been printed, from the inside out. "Is something wrong, dear?" asked Helen calmly. "No, it's just..." He hesitated. "There's something in the image. A number." She wasn't surprised. She simply closed her eyes for a moment and whispered, "I asked God to speak to someone today. I think he started with you." Ethan didn't know what to say. He wasn't prepared to feel what he felt, because for the first time in years, he realized that what was in that room wasn't just a body being examined, it was a soul being touched. But what that number meant, he would only find out later. Helen wasn't like the other patients. There was something about her presence that made time slow down. While most people arrived in a rush, full of complaints, fear in their eyes and noise in their souls, she entered as if she were stepping into sacred ground. She didn't carry anxiety nor denial. It was as if she had already made peace with her own body and with God. Ethan watched from a distance as she settled into the waiting room chair after the scan. Instead of checking her phone or flipping through old magazines, Helen took a worn notebook from her bag. Its edges were frayed. She opened to a page marked with a blue ribbon and began writing with a calmness that defied the hospital atmosphere. Something pushed him to ask, "What exactly are you writing?" he said in a rare impulse of genuine interest. She smiled without lifting her eyes. "Dialogues. Some with God, others with myself. And sometimes, I don't even know who I'm talking to." He stayed silent. It was a response too deep for a casual moment, but something in him wanted to hear more. He wanted to understand how a woman her age, with worrying test results and no one by her side, could carry such near celestial serenity. Minutes later, as he printed the scan for review, the number appeared again, .46:10. Same spot, same subtle glow, as if it had been laser etched by invisible hands. Ethan called in a tech from the maintenance team to check for possible sensor errors. They cleaned the machine, rebooted the system, new image, same result. Never seen anything like this, the tech said. This isn't a system glitch. It's in the image, but it shouldn't be. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The image was printed into his mind as much as onto the screen. He walked over to his wife's bookshelf. Rachel's Bible was still there, on the bottom shelf, between a cookbook and an unfinished novel. He opened it, a piece of paper fell out. An old bookmark, handwritten with a date, April 23rd, just below it. A verse was circled in blue highlighter. Be still, and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Ethan's heart raced. He sat down, read the verse out loud, testing its sound against the silence in the house. And for a moment, he felt as if Rachel was there, not as a memory, but as a presence. The next morning, Helen was back at the hospital, not as a patient, but as a visitor. She had asked permission to visit a few rooms, said she just wanted to pray with whoever was alone. Some doctors found it odd, others allowed it kindly, but no one stopped her. Ethan, curious, approached her, on her way out. Why do you do this? Helen answered without hesitation, because sometimes, God needs human feet to visit hospital rooms. Angels don't always walk the halls. Sometimes he uses ordinary people. And why me? He asked, looking straight into her eyes. Why that number? Why that psalm? She held his hand for a moment and said with a voice that sounded both ancient and eternal, because you stopped listening, and he still speaks to those who stopped believing, especially them. That night, Ethan had a dream. He was walking through a dark hospital where all the rooms were empty, doors wide open, but no one inside, only one light at the end of the hallway. As he approached, he saw the same blue armchair from the earlier dream. Rachel's Bible was open on it, and on the wall, written in letters of fire, 46:10 when he woke up. His eyes were wet with tears, and one question lingered in his mind. What, if this is all real? That morning, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He arrived early and prayed before starting his shift. It was a short prayer, hesitant, almost embarrassed, but it was sincere. If this is real, God, show me again. Not because I deserve it, but because I honestly don't know what to believe anymore. He didn't even have time to process what he was feeling. Before 9 a.m., a new patient was already on the table for an urgent scan. Middle-aged man, recent history of heart problems, persistent cough, nothing Ethan hadn't seen dozens of times. But as soon as the image appeared on the screen, the silence returned. There it was again, this time, in the upper left lung, 46:10. Same script, same glow, same alignment on the scan grid. Ethan took a step back. The image looked like it was smiling at him. It wasn't a tech error. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't digital interference. It was something more. He called Sarah, the nurse. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? He asked, pointing to the screen. Her eyes widened. She whispered, that wasn't in the previous image.
Ethan, what?
Happening? He hesitated, but decided to tell her. He told her about Helen, about the note, about Rachel's Bible, about the dream. Sarah listened without interruption. When he finished, she simply said, I know that verse. It's been my favorite since I was a child. It helped me through the worst day of my life. Maybe it's coming back now, for a reason. Ethan felt the floor give beneath him. He, who thought himself immune to emotion, now had tears in his eyes. I don't get it, Sarah. Why now? Why me? I'm the one who gave up, who turned my back, who blamed God for being silent. Sarah looked at him gently, because he's not like us. He doesn't hold grudges, he holds promises. At the end of his shift, Ethan went to the hospital chapel. It was small, almost forgotten, tucked behind the administrative wing. He stepped inside and sat in the last pew. There was an envelope on the altar, one of those standard prayer envelopes patients and families leave behind with written requests. Curious, he got up and opened it. Inside a sheet of paper with a single sentence, be still and know that I am God. On the back of the paper was a name, Helen M. Carter. He read it over and over. It couldn't have been staged. The envelope was old, the paper yellowed, with signs of handling. But what struck him the most was the year written in the bottom corner, 1997. More than 20 years ago, Helen had left that prayer there, decades before Ethan even started working at that hospital. The next day, he tried to find her only to learn that Helen had never returned after her last scan. No one knew where she had gone, no admission record, no scheduled visit, no emergency contact. It was as if she had come just for that. Ethan began saving copies of the scans with the number. He printed 3, folded them carefully, placed them inside Rachel's Bible. On the last page, he wrote in bold letters, maybe the miracle isn't the healing of the body, but the calling back to faith. That same day, a new patient arrived, a 17-year-old girl, rare cancer, advanced stage. She was pale, but smiling. Said she had already made peace with the idea of dying. But then softly, before the scan, she added, "Last night I dreamed of a room like this," and a voice said, "He will show you what you need to see." Ethan froze. The image appeared. 46:10. He said nothing, just handed her the scan, and left a folded piece of paper with it. Inside, the verse, and Helen's name, written by hand. The following days felt like chapters in a book. Ethan didn't know he was reading, but somehow had been written for him. The X-ray room, once mechanical and lifeless, had become almost sacred. He no longer saw just images. He looked for signs. And the signs kept coming. Not in every scan, not for every patient, but always when someone was too broken to be helped by machines alone. Ethan began printing copies of the scans that had the number 46-10. He folded each one carefully and placed them inside Rachel's Bible, but something inside told him that keeping them wasn't enough. That maybe those images needed to reach other hands, other wounds, other rooms. On Thursday morning, he returned to the chapel, sat in the same pew. The envelope with Helen's name was gone. In its place was a small basket filled with anonymous notes. Short phrases, scribbled in haste. "Lord, hear me, Father. I can't take it anymore. Why my son? Heal my mother." He read each one as if listening to prayers with his eyes. And then, without planning, wrote his own sentence on one of the slips of paper. "Show me where the miracle is hidden." As he walked out, he ran into Sarah. "You look different," she said. "I think I'm trying to come back," Ethan replied, glancing at his hands. "But I'm still afraid to believe." "Fear isn't the opposite of faith," she said gently. "The opposite of faith is indifference. And clearly, you're not indifferent anymore." That afternoon, a new patient arrived. Rebecca, 56, diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder. Doctors said her immune system was shutting down. Her body wasn't responding. No treatment worked. The tests were repetitive, all the same. Until that day, Rebecca entered the room with her head down, but her eyes searched, as if recognizing something in the space. "Have you been here before?" Ethan asked. "Not physically, but I dreamed about this room," she said softly. "When last night I saw this chair, this light, and someone said to me, 'He will show you what God left hidden.'" Ethan's skin prickled. He ran the scan. When the image loaded, there was no need to zoom. The number was already there, not once, but twice, in the lung area and near the clavicle, as if it wanted to be noticed, as if it was shouting. Rebecca held the image. She didn't understand it at first, but Ethan explained. He showed her the other images, told her about Helen, told her about the psalm, and read it slowly, like someone no longer afraid to hear his own faith, leave his mouth, be still, and know that I am God. She cried silently. "I asked for a sign, just to know he was still with me. Maybe he never left," Ethan said. Deeply moved. In the days that followed, Rebecca showed unexpected clinical improvements. The doctors tried to justify it with medication adjustments, immunological shifts, but Sarah knew, Ethan knew, something invisible had been touched. That's when Ethan had the idea. He printed several copies of Psalm 46, folded each one delicately, stapled them to the scans where the number had appeared, and during his shifts, he began leaving these faith packets anonymously in the rooms of patients who seemed most hopeless. One morning, as Ethan was delivering a scan to room 4, an elderly man stopped him. "Who wrote this?" the man asked. Ethan hesitated. "Someone who also needs to believe," he replied. The old man smiled. "Then tell that someone, it worked. I slept in peace last night for the first time in months." The stories began to multiply. Comments started appearing on the chapel's bulletin board. A paper was left in my room. I read it and felt relief. I thought it was just another exam, but that page felt different. I haven't been healed, but I've been reached. That's when Ethan understood. This wasn't coincidence, it was an invitation, a calling, not just for him, but for all those who were trying to survive, when what they really needed was to stop and listen. Because sometimes, healing begins the moment the soul is still. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he had felt like this. Useful in a way that couldn't be measured by awards or applause. The shifts were more intense, but he didn't feel tired. It was as if something outside of his body was carrying his steps, as if the weight hadn't been removed, but redistributed. The following week, an unusual request came in. A group of patients from the rehab unit asked for the Psalm Man to visit them. No one knew who had first given him that nickname, but it stuck, and when Ethan heard it, he nearly laughed. "Me, the Psalm Man?" he asked Sarah, incredulous. "Yeah, you," she replied. "The difference is, now you leave marks that don't show up in reports, and that has been the real healing for a lot of people." So he went. He entered the shared room with an envelope full of folded pages. Each one had Psalm 46 printed on it, along with a short sentence he had written by hand. "You are not alone, and you never were." He handed them out with a simple gesture. No speech, no pressure. Some thanked him, others cried. There was one woman, in particular, who held the paper like it was a piece of eternity. "I asked God for a sign that he was still with me," she said, her voice trembling, and he answered, With this page, in another ward, Ethan met Caleb, a former military chaplain who had lost his speech after a stroke. Doctors said he couldn't communicate clearly anymore, but his eyes said everything. When Ethan handed him one of the pages, Caleb pressed it to his chest and cried like a child. Then he wrote on the whiteboard beside his bed, "That was the psalm I used to read to soldiers before battle." Ethan couldn't hold back the tears. That night, back home, he took Rachel's Bible down from the shelf and ran his fingers across the cover. He opened to the same verse. And for the first time in years, he read it not as a memory, but as a beginning. "Be still, and know that I am God." He closed his eyes and whispered, "I'm trying, love. I'm trying to come back." The next morning, a young resident doctor approached him in the hallway. "Do you have a minute?" "Sure," Ethan replied. "My sister is admitted. Tough diagnosis, a lot of pain, a lot of anger. I heard you've been leaving verses in some rooms. Would you mind leaving one in hers?" Ethan nodded. When he got to the girl's room, he found a teenager lying on her side, facing the wall. Her wristband read, "Emily Rose." He didn't say anything, just placed the envelope with the page on the bedside table and left. 3 days later, the doctor came looking for him again. "I don't know what you did, but she asked for a Bible. She asked us to read the psalm with her. She's smiling. She's accepting treatment." He paused. "I don't know if she'll get better physically, but something in her changed, something no medicine did." Ethan responded only with a quiet smile. He knew that transformation hadn't come from him, he was just the carrier. And sometimes, that was enough. On Saturday, while printing a few scans, the machine jammed out when he opened the paper tray. He found a note he didn't recognize. Handwritten, with an old precise script, it read, "When you doubt, return to the psalm. It still speaks." On the back, a signature, HM.Carter.Helen. Again, he searched the hospital system for the name. Nothing. No recent admission, no phone number, no address. It was as if she had been erased or never existed, as if she had only appeared to fulfill a mission. That night, Ethan recorded a video with his phone. He showed some of the scans with the numbers. He spoke about Helen, about Rachel, about the silence that speaks louder than diagnosis, about how faith, when it returns, doesn't make noise. It simply rearranges everything. Maybe you clicked on this video by accident, maybe out of desperation. But if you made it this far, it's because you needed to hear this. Be still. He is still God. He paused, and if this psalm appeared to me so many times, maybe today is the day it appears to you. And he ended with an invitation. Comment the name of someone you love, someone who's hurting. Let's fill this page with invisible prayers only God can hear. Because believe me, he still answers. Sometimes with a number, sometimes with an you. Room 309 was at the end of the hallway, on the left side. It was a small room, windowless, reserved for palliative care. Inside was Mr. Thomas Blake, 81 years old, a former math teacher. He'd been admitted with respiratory complications, and after weeks of fighting, the doctors no longer hid the truth. There wasn't much more to do. Ethan passed by that room many times, but always respected the silence that surrounded it. Mr. Blake had no visitors, no children, no grandchildren, no friends. Only one nurse said that every night, he asked for a sheet of paper and a pen. He would write for a few minutes, and then fall asleep. One late afternoon, Ethan left one of the folded Psalm 46 copies on the bedside table. He didn't enter, just placed it there, between a tissue box and a glass of water. The next day, the room was empty. Mr. Blake had passed away during the night, peacefully, without pain, without noise. But there was something left on the pillow, a piece of notebook paper, carefully folded, with a sentence written in large, trembling but clear letters. "I was still, and he came." And below, like a spiritual signature, Blake, former master of reason, new student of faith. Ethan held the paper for a long time, and in that moment, he understood that page had fulfilled its purpose. Maybe it hadn't healed the body, but it had freed the soul. He placed the note inside Rachel's Bible, and silently wrote on the back cover, "The faith that comes at the end still arrives in time." Ethan's video wasn't made to go viral. It was filmed in a dark room, without a script, without production. Just him, his phone, camera, and a sincere need to tell what he had lived. But what was meant to be, a simple outpouring, became a seed. In 3 days, over 50,000 views, comments of all kinds. People saying they too had seen strange numbers in old scans. Others claiming Psalm 46-10 had appeared in dreams. Notes, devotionals. But what stood out the most was the number of requests, names please, confessions. It was as if that digital space had become a spiritual hallway. In the video, an altar. "My dad's in the ICU. I pray for him every day. I have cancer, but this message helped me breathe differently. I left this psalm on my daughter's pillow. She slept in peace." And then, among the comments, came one that made Ethan freeze. "That number showed up on my mom's x-ray, and the doctors have no explanation." He clicked on the profile. It was real. A young woman named Lauren, from Alabama. She had posted the image clearly, upper corner of the right lung. 46:10. Exactly the same. That night, Ethan returned to the chapel. It was empty. He sat in the front pew, took a deep breath, and for the first time, spoke to God out loud. I understand now, Lord. The number wasn't the sign. The pain wasn't the punishment. The silence wasn't absence. It was preparation. He closed his eyes. And if you want to keep using this story, I'm ready. You can print whatever you want, wherever you want, even on me. The following Sunday, Ethan submitted a simple project to hospital administration, a small box filled with printed copies of Psalm 46. Any patient could take one, read it, keep it. At the bottom of the box, a wooden plaque read, "Be still. He is still God." The hospital approved it. The box was placed at the entrance of the imaging wing. Within a week, over 100 pages had been taken. Some were returned with notes, others with names, others with dried tears. But had started with a radiograph had now become a chain dot. Days later, Ethan received a letter at the hospital. It was handwritten, plain envelope, unknown sender. Inside, a single sentence. "What you did for me, no one saw, but God did." At the bottom, an unexpected signature. Rachel. Ethan froze. His heart raced. It was her handwriting. Impossible. Or maybe not. Because when he opened the Bible that night, he found an old bookmark between the final pages. A card Rachel had written, years ago. "If one day you lose your faith, come back here. God will remind you who you were." He smiled, his eyes wet. "With tears, I came back. Love." And he reminded me. At the end of the updated video, a message appeared. No narration, just soft music and white text over a black background. If this story touched your heart, comment the name of someone who needs to hear this psalm, or simply write, "Quiet my soul, Lord. God still speaks." We just need to stop shouting, so we can hear him. And in the final frame, like a whispered image, Psalm 46:10, "Be still, and know that I am God."